Good morning and welcome back to the Vision Alignment Show, where we get to know how important it is to have our core beliefs, our core values aligned with our vision. Man, I tell you, it's just exciting to be on, exciting to have so many of you with us during this time. You know, it's incredible because we're doing our best to bring this show to you, and we have so many good guests coming up for you in the future. Now, we'll go into those in a little bit. But today, we have somebody joining us that truly knows her vision. Oh my gosh. What she has gone through over the last 7-8 years has just been absolutely incredible. And so many people will get so much value from having this conversation with her. So please do me a favor and just be as attentive as possible. Make sure you comment as much as possible. But without any further ado, I want to bring on our guest today, none other than, I promise I'm going to get there, none other than Jaime MoCrazy.
Hello, everybody. It's so great. I'm honored that you have me on the show.
I am so happy you're here. We are so happy you're here because you've got so much to offer us.
Well, thank you. I'm excited for the show.
Good. Now, Jaime, do you go by Jaime or Mo?
I go by all sorts of things. I go by Jaime. I go by MoCrazy. I go by Mo. People have different things that they want to call me.
Okay. So tell me, when is your first recollection of knowing your vision?
Well, that's an interesting question because when I was a child, like as soon as my memory was formed, I had a vision. I had a strong vision and kind of a weak vision. And my strong vision was to become a professional athlete. Since when, you have little kids and you say, what are you going to be? And they say an astronaut or, what do you want to be? A professional athlete. And I didn't know if I wanted to do it in gymnastics, skiing, or soccer. Those were my 3 main sports. But I wanted to become a professional athlete. And I also wanted to help the world. And so what happened was that, as we'll talk about it later, but I had a very big life change that happened, and it took away the professional athlete portion, which I had become, and it gave me a larger platform to be able to help the world. And so that has kind of always been part of my vision.
Wow. If you want to hear more, stay right there. Wow, Jaime, incredible. We're really looking forward to hearing more about your story. So tell us, what is your story? And for everybody on the line, please chime in with any questions you have. Go ahead.
So, as I mentioned, as a child, I wanted to become a professional athlete. And by the time I was 9 years old, I had actually won state championships in skiing and won state championships in gymnastics. And I said my sports fantasy on an interview was to become a professional skiing and gymnastics combination. And so I started competing in slopestyle and halfpipe skiing. At the time when I started competing in them, they actually were not Olympic events. They were X Games, which is the extreme sports. And so they would only invite 8 women in the world to X Games. So it actually was a little bit harder to make it to X Games than the Olympics, which I have made. So that was exciting. But so I was on this career path for being a professional slopestyle and halfpipe skier. I was competing at Dew Tour, X Games, Grand Prix, World Cups around the world, from Ushuaia, Argentina, to Finland, to Norway, all sorts of areas that have snow. I've been to basically everywhere in the world that has snow. So I was competing and traveling the world. And on April 11th, 2015, I was actually competing at World Tour Finals, part of the Whistler Ski and Snowboard Festival up at Whistler, Canada. And on my first run, I ended up in 4th place. And as someone who had been ranked first or second overall in the world for 3 consecutive years, 4th place was not on the podium. No one remembers 4th place. It doesn't really cut it. So I changed my off-axis backflip to an off-axis double backflip. And previously, I had become actually the first woman in the world to land any sort of double flip in a slopestyle competition run at the 2013 X Games. So I thought I had a pretty good chance of getting on that podium, maybe even the top of the podium. So on that run, though, however, I landed on my feet, but I caught an edge and I whiplashed my head onto the snow in such a way my brain started bleeding in 8 spots. And I hurt my right brainstem, which paralyzed my right side. It was actually a very complicated injury. It was a 3rd-degree diffuse axonal injury. And if you Google that and start looking things up, you'll see it was incredibly traumatic. And the results quite often are death and very, very low recovery rates. And so actually when I was airlifted to Vancouver General Hospital, my first responders wrote my fatality report. And I arrived at Vancouver General Hospital, and within a few days of the very deep coma, I started to have different forms of recovery and started recovering. I came out of the coma 10 days later. I had serious amnesia for 6 weeks after that. So absolutely no memory of day to day. Kind of like if you've seen the movie 50 First Dates, how the star of it, she doesn't remember her day-to-day interactions. I wouldn't remember my day-to-day interactions at all. And then after 6 weeks, my mind began to stick around, so I would remember things day to day. I had some short-term memory. And then I had a lot of factors to my healing, an incredible amount. I had tremendous support, both medically and from my family caregivers, led by my mom, who had a training in science and master programs of psychology, early childhood brain development, all sorts of things. So I can go on for hours about that, which led to our new vision, which we can get to later. But that's my support really allowed me to communicate on a much larger platform for all the wonderful people who helped me become who I am today.
Wow. So 6 weeks in the hospital, or you more than 6 weeks?
More than 6 weeks in the hospital. 6 weeks of intensive amnesia, so no memory portion. And then I continued in the hospital for a few weeks after my mind began to come back. So
Oh,
for like
wow.
3 or 4 weeks.
That's crazy. MoCrazy.
Yeah. Yeah, so I was in the hospital for a few months. And with MoCrazy, that had actually been my nickname since I was a child. And then it developed even stronger my ski career. Jaime, my birth last name was Crane Mosey, Jaime Crane Mosey, the MoCrazy. And then when I actually crashed, I'm looking down on my arm because I have a tattoo on it, and that tattoo, you can't really see it here, but it says MoCrazy Strong.
Yeah,
And so within 24 hours of my crash, my little sister, who was at World Tour Finals with me, competing in her first ever World Tour Finals, which she didn't actually compete in because was in the hospital with me. She was up there and she watched my run, and she saw me crash, and she skied down, and she heard the ski patrol radio crackle to life saying, "We need all hands on deck and a helicopter on standby." And she skied down to me and saw me convulsing, spewing blood. My eyes were rolled back in my head. And so she had to deal firsthand with that whole experience. And then she started the hashtag that night, MoCrazy Strong, with the idea that MoCrazy was going to become strong again. And that's our website, our nonprofit. It's really become our brand, MoCrazy Strong. And the term MoCrazy is a step up from just, it's more crazy, MoCrazy. It embodies doing things that other people think of as extreme but have been thought out. And so they're not really irrational decisions. They're thought out decisions, and they're taking, someone who might be quitting their job to do an entrepreneurship thing that they've always dreamed about would be doing a MoCrazy type of activity.
Okay. Well, that's cool. So, and I'm assuming that's what you talk with people about when you're with them, when you do keynotes?
I don't directly talk about MoCrazy. That's just my part of my brand. But I do talk about climbing alternative peaks after you've encountered unexpected trauma. So there are so many steps that went into my recovery process, like I've mentioned. And so we talk about the steps anyone can take after encountering unexpected trauma. Because there's way more of your luck that you can control. And so, steps you can take, habits you can build, the whole concept of changing your neuroplasticity and rewiring your brain is still a very new concept for a lot of individuals. And so, I speak about that. And I also find it important to bring in a little bit of the entertainment factor. I have some great videos that I start out with. I walk on the stage to Style by Taylor Swift, the chorus. Like, we come back every time we go crashing down because we'll never go out of style. We'll never go out of style. And that I actually was really, I loved that song. As soon as my mind came back in my recovery, we did a lot of music therapy. So when I was in the hospital, my family would play music. And I really attached to the chorus of Style by Taylor Swift because I had gone crashing down and I never wanted to go out of style. So doing that, and then another little tidbit of a bit about the drama and the entertainment factor of it. So I tell my story tied into life lessons. Like, one of my life lesson story type things is about how when I was in outpatient therapy, I wanted to do things a little bit more crazy again. And I didn't have the balance and couldn't do all that much. And I wanted to go skateboarding, and it was unsafe for me to go skateboarding. However, instead of thinking, okay, I can't do that, my mom was talking to my physical therapist, and they all came up with the idea that I would bring my skateboard to the outpatient therapy, and on the apparatus that usually we learn how to walk on, I would be harnessed in, and I would get to go skateboarding. So I got to be MoCrazy and do fun things, and I was also safe. If I fell, I wouldn't hit my head at all, which really leads to the fact that you can get to the destination you want to while taking alternative paths if you think creatively on how to get there, which is like a really relevant concept, especially with COVID. We're all encountering an unexpected trauma, and virtual is an example of trying to get things done and getting to that end destination while taking alternative paths. That's been one of the big challenges that we've all had to face. And the more open you are to thinking, how can I get it done, instead of, yes, it's going to happen, or no, it's not, just opens it up. So I tell those types of stories. I'll tie it in and I have a very good success rate with tears and laughter. So it's a very emotional presentation. And then at the very end, I say, I've given you a story and I've given you tips. So next time the world throws you upside down, make sure you know how to walk on your hands. And then I'll kick up to a handstand and walk on my hands and then go, woo! And get a lot of applause.
Oh, that's awesome. I love it. Wow. So you've given us a lot to think about. So and for others that are online, please chime in with your comments, questions, any of that. If you're listening live, please put in a hashtag live. If you're listening on replay, put in a hashtag replay, and just do that for us. That would be great. Now, while those questions are coming in, Jamie, you know, how does it make you feel when you get off a stage and you get a round of applause because you've done what you've done?
Well, I've always been a bit of a performer. So that's part of since I was a child, why I loved to compete was because that was a performance in front of an audience. So that led to my love of competing and my love of performing. So I love to walk out on stage. And one of the things I did actually right before COVID started was I actually was back speaking at an event called Multiplicity at the World Ski and Snowboard Festival, which it was in Whistler, Canada. So similar to my accident, that World Ski and Snowboard Festival. But I walked out on stage and it was a sold out crowd to 1,000 people. And I was telling my story to people who had actually had lived experience connection to my story because it was the World Tour final, so a lot of people were watching and a lot of people in the audience had participated in my recovery process. And one of the people in the audience was actually my first responder who was sitting on top of me when they brought me down in the sled and pumping air because I wasn't breathing on my own.
Oh.
And so that was like one of the most emotional venues that I've spoken to, but it just fires me up when I walk out on stage. And I believe that I have a message and a platform to be able to motivate people to accomplish things that they don't think are possible and to climb alternative peaks. That's the motto of it. And that means that you're climbing a mountain peak, you get caught in a metaphorical avalanche that slides you down to the base of the mountain. You can choose to stay stuck at the bottom, blame all your deficits on your injury or what happened to you, your life event, or you can climb an alternative peak and you can take steps and you can build the habits that will allow you to climb to beautiful views and potentially even a bigger peak than the one you were on originally if you take the steps and you take the time to climb an alternative peak, which is what we all need to do after we encounter unexpected trauma.
Wow. Wow. That's beautiful. So tell me, and there's some comments that have come in. So there's our good friend Randall Reader is on. Randall, good morning. It's good to see you this morning. So any other comments, please, bring them on. But I'm going to ask. Before we go too far, you mentioned that there's something next. So there's your next vision, right? So what is that?
Well, my next vision, it has become tying in my life experience with education and outreach for traumatic brain injury survivors and family caregivers. So that is done through motivational speaking events. We have the nonprofit MoCrazy Strong, and so all of the motivational events that I keynote at, the money goes to MoCrazy Strong, and some of that money allows us to do things like we're currently right now talking with a young woman and her mom. So the woman is the family caregiver. She's 18, an 18-year-old. Or sorry, not family caregiver, TBI survivor. And then her mom, and she shattered her brain in a fall. And we give out consulting and advice to family caregivers and TBI supporters. And because we know firsthand how much financial trouble goes into having a traumatic brain injury. You have to pay for so much more than you ever expected. And the limited amount that insurance covers. And sometimes there's things like Utah has a traumatic brain injury rehabilitation fund. And so I was actually a participant of that. And I work on that at the Utah Brain Injury Council. We control what it does. But what it did for me was my insurance would cover 3 days a week of outpatient therapy maximum. And I did 5 days a week outpatient therapy. So after I left the hospital, I was going 5 days a week to therapy for occupational therapy, speech therapy, and physical therapy. And then I would joke I did 7 hours, 7 days a week of my mom's therapy. But therapy is so important to your recovery. So they know that, but the insurance won't cover as much as they think you should be receiving. So the TBI Rehabilitation Fund will cover things like that. But above and beyond that, it changes your life and then also your family caregiver's life. And there's so much unknown that to hear advice from someone who has gone through that and also can share with you, maybe taking some fish oils. I started fish oils when I was on the feeding tube. My family asked if they could put them into my feeding tube, and the doctor said yes. But that is good for your brain, and it's been proven that it helps. And nature therapy, music therapy, all sorts of different factors. What I'm getting to is that you shouldn't have to pay for your consultation from peer to peer. So we use the funds from my motivational speaking to help with this, what we can deliver in the nonprofit source. So we do take donations, and we do take awareness and donations on MoCrazyStrong.com.
There you go. Go right there.
All of that goes to help individuals whose lives have been changed unexpected and immediately. You can get in a car and you can have a car crash and your life might never be the same. And we know now that it can be even better because you can rewire your brain. We have trillions of synaptic connections and brain pathways, and we can rewire our brain after brain injury, but there's so many aspects that play to it. Like one of the things that my mom and I are giving a presentation on next week is actually the food. Your nutrition choices after a brain injury affect the outcome. So if you're having saturated fats or sugar, there's a little bit of research. A lot of people know that like sugar can be addictive, and after a brain injury, it's way easier to be an addictive type thing, and it does change your brain negatively and creates some challenges. So,
when did you start on your? When did you decide to start on your mission? Robert says.
Well, Robert, that's a great question because it's been so basically, like I was saying at the beginning, I had my accident when I was in the coma. 24 hours after my accident, Jeannie started the hashtag MoCrazyStrong, which was the very birth of the concept of MoCrazyStrong. So then throughout my recovery process, because my injury was so severe and so critical, the steps, people kept saying, wow, you had this and this happened, like it's so inspirational. And we learned steps that people can replicate and they can do to have their own positive traumatic brain injury recovery stories. We've actually worked, so there's an individual who I met in the hospital at Vancouver General Hospital a year and a half after my injury. So I met him, and he is now actually back snowboarding and he's doing amazing. And he had a very critical accident as well. And his mom and I, before we met, so we met in the hospital, but even before that, a couple months before that, we started communicating virtually and through emails and stuff. And she took a lot of the steps that we advised on. Nature therapy, setting attainable goals to reach your growth goals. So some of the like behind the scenes steps, which MoCrazyStrong offers. And so it started immediately. And then with my accident, and then it grew. So I started going Like an example is 3 months after my injury. So I was like just leaving the hospital, and I went to the Brain Injury Alliance of Utah's annual convention. And then since then, I've spoken at it. I've done campaigns for them. I've done videos for them. So we've stayed very connected to the Brain Injury Alliance of Utah. And then we have just recently worked with the attorney worked with the attorney on making MoCrazy strong. It was originally set up as an LLC, and
Mm-hmm.
so we transferred it to a nonprofit. So that has been happening within this fall and winter, and so we've been taking a lot of. It's still happening.
Yeah.
So the yeah.
Well, that's awesome. I love it. Wow. So you've got a lot of stuff going on. You've got so much growth that's happening right now. But where do you see blind spots, and who helps you to see your blind spots?
Some of my blind spots, well, within the past 2 years with COVID, there was a lot of blind spots. So we had Jeannie, my sister, had made a website, and we had started my public speaking, and I went back to university. I didn't graduate from college until 2019. And then when 2019 hit, I actually went to the Three Ring Circus.
Ah,
Yeah. And that opened my eyes to the speaking industry.
hmm.
And before the Three Ring Circus, I thought I knew a lot about speaking. And then I went to the Three Ring Circus, and I realized I didn't know what NSA was. and
Ah,
so then as soon as I came home, I joined my local chapter. And last year was actually the first summer that I went to the annual convention. Last year was in Las Vegas. And so that was one of the blind spots that I definitely had in my speaking career. And so it's pretty fortunate I've actually, over COVID, every year been making more money in my speaking than the year before. And it's beginning to grow exponentially right now. So that's extremely exciting. But so I'd say within the past 2 years, we've just had so many obvious blind spots. Like we had to redesign our website, we had to redesign the speaking reel, we had to become a nonprofit, we had to make all these steps. So they were kind of obvious. I'd say for just the blind spots, my mom, my sister, and I would just like notice them. And then we're part of the Park City, like we live in Park City, so Park City Chamber of Commerce, and like so some of these types of things, and some of that advice gets some of the blind spots. And I've interviewed some of the speakers that I admire their speaking careers, and they've made it their career for 30 years, and they've pointed out some of the blind spots. So at the beginning of COVID, that was one of the big blind spots that was pointed out, was that my website looked like my little sister made it, which she did. But so that was one of the big things. And it was interesting because like working with the web team, and the person we worked with had done a lot of other speaker websites, and he actually took us 6 months to like reconstruct it, and we still work with him. He updates it and keeps it looking nice and stuff.
wow.
But so that's a little bit about blind spots. We've just had
Hmm.
more obvious ones, and like another example of when we had MoCrazy Strong as an LLC. That was actually we created it as an LLC in 2019 because we were planning on making a documentary about about my injury and the family's connection to it. And that was put on hold until actually this summer or spring, May 28th. I'm getting married at Whistler.
What?
Yeah, I'm getting married at Whistler. So when
Congratulations.
I walk down the aisle, you can see the run that changed my life. And
Wow.
gonna be at the outside the lodge, the big lodge at the top of the mountain, and the whole thing is gonna be filmed, and we're working with a documentary producer who we already have some footage because we've done things in the past, and so we have video footage of different stuff, and so he's going to take it all and he's going to create a documentary that will be coming out this July. However, so we made it for the original time right before COVID hit, and we'd actually partnered with the company that puts out X Games, and then we were actually flying out here to finalize the contract in March of 2020 and lost millions of dollars in intended revenue overnight. And this was put on the back burner. And yeah, so there's that trauma. And then there was also, as we were trying to build everything, like right after I had graduated college and trying to turn it into a professional career, all these vision and dreams that I had, we were encountered by a global
poof.
Yeah. Made a lot of changes, but there's some really exciting things that are happening. So
wow, I would love to have you come back on the show and talk about more of those exciting things that are happening. I can't believe our time is up already, for this show. You've been such a phenomenal guest. I really appreciate your time.
Thank you. And I really appreciate you inviting me on. I am so happy to be here.
Well, we'll do it again. Thank you. Yeah, so let's see, who else do we have on? Randall says, good, you're a part of the member of the NSA, which is nice. So will you happen to be in Nashville for Influence this year?
Yes, I will.
Okay. I will see you there. So I'll be there too.
Okay.
And I know Randall will be. Anyway, any last words that you want to leave our audience with?
I would just leave the audience with the concept of one of the big mottos that I was raised with by Mama MoCrazy, my mama fruit, was be your own personal best. And that differs from just being the best, because your own personal best might be withdrawing from the Summer Olympics. Your own personal best might be walking your dog. Your own personal best might be taking the steps to set attainable goals to reach your growth goals. There's just such a variety. And I really began to understand that motto that I was raised with, because my own personal best went from being someone who could double flip to being someone who it took 2 weeks to swallow water after my feeding tube was taken out. And so to be able to swallow water was my own personal best. And so if you always act on your own personal best, you will climb the most beautiful peaks with the beautiful views.
Beautiful. I love it. I am so glad you came on this morning.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me.
Absolutely. Thank you. And would you hang out in the green room for a little bit?
I'd love to.
All right. I'll see you there in a sec.
Okay.
All right. Bye.
Bye.
Oh, my goodness. Another great show. And MoCrazy is crazy. Wow. Just the learning we got to do from her has been phenomenal. We've got great shows coming up next week, and we have Austin Grammon coming out. And I'm not sure if I'm pronouncing his name right or not, but Grammon, Grammon, and he is the CEO and president, co-CEO of SpeakerFlow. And SpeakerFlow is a great tool that we have to use as speakers, and I use it myself, but it's been phenomenal. So we're going to talk more with him next week, so make sure you tune in for that. I'm just so glad you're here. I'm so glad we all get together for a little chat this morning. Just remember, if there's ever anything that I can do for you, I'd love to do it. And as always, keep one eye on the road.